Hello everyone. Today we'll walk you through 3 essential steps for starting a boiler as safely as possible. Starting a typical industrial boiler involves 3 main stages. First, inspect the system. Second, fire up the boiler. Third, open the steam supply valve. Many operators go straight to the second stage, firing up the boiler, and either skip the system inspection or perform it too quickly without covering every required item. That is why DIVI has made this video for boiler operators, boiler managers, and plant managers. It will guide you through the correct sequence for starting a boiler as safely as possible. The first stage accounts for around 70% of a safe boiler startup, so operators need to pay close attention. Let's begin with stage 1, the pre-start inspection. The pre-start inspection consists of 4 steps. Step 1, switch on all circuit breakers in the electrical cabinet. Set the feedwater system to automatic mode and set the fans and fuel feeding system to manual mode. Make sure all alarm buzzers and warning lights are switched on and confirm that the cabinet voltage is between 370 and 400 volts. Step 2, test the water treatment system in manual mode. Make sure the bypass valve remains closed and all other valves remain open. Then switch the system to automatic mode. Step 3, check the water level in the storage tank or deaerator. The storage tank or deaerator is fitted with a sight glass and a level control chamber. These are used to monitor the water level and control the feedwater pump. Check the level through the sight glass. If it is within the permitted range, the water level is acceptable. Next, open the drain valve on the level control chamber to test the water treatment system. When the valve is opened, the water level in the chamber will drop, causing the water treatment pump to start filling the tank. When the valve is closed, the pump will stop. This confirms that the tank's water level sensor and the water treatment system are ready to supply water. The configuration may vary depending on the system designer. Some systems have dedicated low-water audible and visual alarms for the storage tank or deaerator, while others only control the tank filling pump. In the latter case, the pump starts when the water level is low and stops when the tank is full, without triggering any audible or visual low-water alarm. Based on DIVI's experience, the safest option is to equip the storage tank or deaerator with both audible and visual low-water alarms. That completes step 3. Now let's move on to step 4. Check all valves that must be open before starting the boiler. There is a small air vent valve at the top of the boiler. Keep this valve open to release all the air from the boiler. It should only be closed after the boiler begins producing steam. During boiler startup, only close the air vent valve once steam begins escaping from it. What can happen if the air vent valve is not open during startup? This is a common question. Based on DIVI's practical experience, if the air is not completely released during startup, the pressure gauge and boiler water level readings may be inaccurate. This makes the boiler harder to operate. Fully open all isolation valves on the feedwater line and make sure water can flow freely through the system. There are normally 6 isolation valves on this line, and all of them must be open. The isolation valves for the pressure gauge, switch, and sensor must also be fully open. That completes step 4, checking the normally open valves. Step 5 is to check the normally closed valves. The main steam valve must remain closed during startup. It should only be open when steam is ready to be supplied to production. The blowdown valves must also remain closed and should only be open when blowing down the boiler. Now let's move on to step 6, checking the boiler water level. Check the boiler water level through the sight glass. If the level is visible between the 2 marked limits, the boiler contains the required amount of water. If the water level is not visible in the sight glass, check whether the boiler has too little or too much water. Simply open the sight glass drain valve. If you see the water level drop into view, the boiler contains too much water and the level is above the sight glass's visible range. In that case, drain some water through the boiler blowdown valve until the water returns to its normal level. If no water appears in the sight glass, the boiler is low on water. If the water level control system is working properly, it will automatically pump water into the boiler when the circuit breaker in the electrical cabinet is switched on. That completes step 6. Now let's move on to step 7. Check the boiler water level control signals. This test is usually performed by draining the level control chamber. The water level probes or float-type sensors are connected to this chamber. When the chamber is drained, the water level signal is sent to the control cabinet, which triggers the necessary alarms and controls the pump system. When the chamber is drained, the following responses confirm that the system is operating normally. First, the level 1 alarm buzzer and warning light should activate. Second, the feedwater pump should start and supply water to the boiler. Third, when the chamber's drain valve is closed, the low water buzzer and warning light should switch off, and the pump should stop. If the alarms and pump do not respond in this way, there is a problem with the water level control system. Do not start the boiler under these conditions. The operator must inspect and correct the control system. The boiler may only be started once the system operates as described. Now let's move on to step 8, checking the fan system. Switch on all induced draft, forced draft, ash return, and secondary air fans to check their rotation and any unusual noise. For oil, gas, or CNG-fired boilers without an induced draft fan, skip this step. The fans meet the requirements if they rotate correctly without unusual noise. Once the inspection is complete, move on to stage 2, firing up the boiler. This is relatively straightforward. For oil, gas, or CNG-fired boilers or other boilers equipped with an ignition burner, start the induced draft and forced draft fans, if fitted, at their lowest settings. Run the burner and fuel feeding system at their lowest settings to begin firing the boiler. Pay attention to the following interlocks between these devices. The induced draft fan must run before the forced draft fan. Start the induced draft fan before the ignition burner. Once the fuel is burning properly, gradually increase the firing rate as required. Observe the flame through the inspection ports and flame viewing doors. Other types of boilers, without an ignition burner, must be lit manually. Each operator may use a different method. Some use a piece of sackcloth, while others use a discarded rag with a small amount of diesel, kerosene, or some scrap paper. Regardless of the method, everyone should follow these general steps. Step 1. Place a layer of fuel inside the combustion chamber. If your regular fuel has a high moisture content, use dry, low moisture material during ignition, such as pallet wood, dry firewood, rice husks, or wood shavings. This will help the boiler ignite more quickly. Step 2. Prepare the ignition material. We normally use a piece of scrap cloth with a small amount of diesel and light it with a lighter. If possible, spread a little diesel over the fuel to help it ignite more quickly. Never use gasoline for ignition. It burns extremely quickly and is very dangerous for the operator. Step 3. Place the fire starter on the fuel inside the boiler, then open the combustion chamber door to allow natural airflow. Step 4. Start the induced draft fan at its lowest setting. If it does not have a variable frequency drive, set all control dampers to the minimum opening. Too much draft will extinguish the flame and the boiler will have to be relit. Once the induced draft fan is running, the flame should improve. Gradually increase the fan setting to strengthen the flame. At this stage, increase the frequency from 10 to 15 Hz, adjusting it to the actual conditions of your boiler. If there is no variable frequency drive, open the control damper very slightly and increase the airflow in small increments. Step 5. Start the forced draft fan, also known as the combustion air fan. Before starting it, make sure the combustion chamber door is closed. Many boilers have a safety interlock on this door. When the door is open, the forced draft fan cannot be started. This protects nearby operators from flames blowing out through the open door. Start the forced draft fan at its lowest setting. If the fan does not have a variable frequency drive, set its air control damper to the minimum opening. Maintain only a very small amount of airflow into the combustion chamber so the flame does not go out. Then increase the fan setting slightly to intensify combustion. Step 6. Start feeding fuel into the boiler at a low rate. Look through the flame viewing ports or door openings to check whether too much fuel is entering the combustion chamber. If there is too much, temporarily stop the fuel supply and allow the existing fuel to ignite properly before feeding in more. Step 7. Based on how well the fuel is burning, gradually increase the induced draft fan, forced draft fan, and fuel feeding system. You may also start the supplementary air fan, ash return fan, and any other fans at low settings. Do not rush these adjustments. Increase the fans and fuel supply gradually, a little at a time. Increasing them too much at once can weaken combustion, extend the startup process, and waste fuel. With repeated operation, you will learn the specific characteristics and operating parameters of each boiler. A bright, steady flame indicates that the settings are appropriate. Step 8. Close the air vent valve once the boiler water begins to boil and produce steam. When steam escapes from the vent valve at the top of the boiler, it means the water is boiling and all the air has been expelled. Close the valve at this point and allow the boiler pressure to rise. Step 9. Drain some water from the boiler if necessary. As the water temperature rises, thermal expansion causes the boiler water level to rise as well. Monitor the sight glass and, if required, drain some water through the boiler blowdown valve. With experience, you can stop filling the boiler as soon as the level 1 low water warning light switches off. You will then need to drain only a very small amount of water, or may not need to drain any water at all during this step. Now let's move on to step 10. When the boiler pressure reaches 80% of its operating pressure, test the low water protection system again and recheck the operation of both safety valves. For detailed instructions on these tests, please watch the video 2 Simple Steps for Safe Boiler Operation on DIVI's channel. Compare the readings on the mechanical pressure gauge and the digital pressure display on the electrical cabinet. If there is any discrepancy, identify and fully resolve the cause before operating the boiler. Once the boiler reaches 80% of its operating pressure, move on to stage 3, opening the steam supply valve. At 80% of operating pressure, open the main steam valve at the top of the boiler to supply steam to the plant. When opening this valve, follow these steps carefully. First, open the valve by half a turn. This allows a small amount of steam to enter and warm the pipeline. Wait approximately 5 minutes so the steam can fill the line and heat it gradually. When the hissing sound at the valve stops, open the hand wheel by another 2 turns to increase the steam flow. Wait about 2 more minutes for steam to fill the pipeline. Then open the hand wheel by another 2 turns every 2 minutes until the valve is fully open. Once fully open, turn it back by half a turn. Why does this process involve so many steps? If the main steam valve is opened suddenly, a large volume of steam will enter the cold pipeline. This can cause uneven or abnormal thermal expansion and may even rupture the pipeline if its structure is not sufficiently secure. Plant operators must follow this procedure carefully to complete the boiler startup safely. Once steam is being supplied to production and the boiler has reached the required pressure, set the operating parameters for the fuel feeding and fan systems, then switch the boiler to automatic operation. Those were the 3 basic stages for starting a boiler as safely as possible. We hope this practical experience has been helpful. Please like and share this video to support the channel and stay tuned for more videos from DIVI. We wish you safe and efficient boiler operation. Thank you.